दोस्तों। हेलो दोस्तों। एंड आज आज मैं बहुत खुश हूँ यार। होना चाहिए यार। ऑलवेज कीप स्माइल ऑन योर फेस। ओके। स्माइल है। स्माइल ना तुम्हारे चेहरे पर होनी चाहिए। हर हर समय। आप बात टाइम में हो या खुश में या दुख में हो यार। स्माइल तो आप में मुंह से छीननी नहीं चाहिए, जानी नहीं चाहिए। कितनी भी बड़ी प्रॉब्लम हो यार, स्माइल करोगे ना, उसका सोल्यूशन मिल जाएगा। ओके, लास्ट क्लास बोल रहा हूँ मैं, लास्ट वीडियो में वी टॉक अबाउट। ओके, लास्ट क्लास में हम स्टडी किए थे भाई चैप्टर नंबर 5 एंड उसमें से एक प्रिंसिपल हमें अच्छा लगा, वो हम पर सीखने मिला। वो था भाई, टॉक इन टर्म्स ऑफ अदर पर्सनस इंटरेस्ट। आप जिसके साथ भी बात करना कर रहे हो भाई, उसका इंटरेस्ट के बारे में बात करो, ना कि भाई अपने बारे में ही बताएगा तो भाई उस उनको कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं होगा कि भाई तुम्हारे बारे में जानने को। सबको ना अपने बारे में जानने को बहुत इंटरेस्ट होता है। सो उनके बारे में और उनके इंटरेस्ट के बारे में बात करो। ओके, ये प्रिंसिपल 5 था। एंड आज प्रिंसिपल 6 जानने वाले हैं। ये हो लास्ट चैप्टर वो पार्ट 2 का फंडामेंटल 6 वेज टू पीपल लाइक यू के बारे में। एंड इसका सबटाइटल क्या है कि हाउ टू मेक पीपल लाइक यू इंस्टेंटली। इंस्टेंटली लोग आपको कैसे पसंद करेंगे, उसके बारे में ही हम पर लिखा है। तो इसके बारे में कुछ जानना जानना पड़ेगा। तो जानने के लिए तो इस टॉपिक में कूदना पड़ेगा। तो चल कूदते हैं। Okay, I was waiting in line to register a letter in the post office at 33rd Street and English Avenue in Newark. I noticed that the clerk appeared to be bored with the job, winning envelopes, handing out stamps, making change, issuing receipts, the same monotonous grind year after year. So I said myself, I am going to try a new that make clerk like me. Obviously, to make him like me, I must say something nice, not about myself, but about him. So I asked myself, what is there about him that I can honestly admire? That is sometimes hard question to answer, especially with strangers. But in this case, it happened to be easy. I instantly saw something I admire no end. So while he was winning my envelope, I remarked with enthusiasm, I certainly wish I had your head of hair. Or he looked up half startled, his face beaming with smile. Well, it is not as good as it used to be, he said modestly. I assured him that although it might have lost some of its pristine glory, nevertheless, it was still magnificent. He was immensely pleased. We carried on a pleasant little conversation, and last thing he said to me was, many people have admired my hair. Okay, I will be that person went out to lunch that day walking on air. I will be the he went home that night and told his wife about it. I will be I will bet he looked in mirror and said it was a beautiful head of hair. I told this story once in public and a man asked me afterwards, what did you want to get out of him? आप उनसे क्या चाहते थे? And what was I trying to get out of him? And what was I trying to get out of him? वे बार बार क्वेश्चन करने लगा वो बंदा है कि if we are contemptibly selfish that we can't radiate a little happiness and pass on a bit of honest appreciation without trying to get something out of the other person in return, if our souls are no bigger than our scrap, apples. We shall meet with the failure we so richly deserve. Oh, yes, I did want something out of the chap. I wanted something priceless, and I got it. I got it. The feeling that I had done something for him without his being able to do anything, whatever. In return for me, that is a feeling that flows and sings in your memory long after the incident passed. There is one all important law of human conduct. If we obey that law, we shall almost never get into trouble. In fact, that law, if obeyed, I will bring us countless friends and constant happiness. But the very instant we break the law, we shall get into endless trouble. The law is this: always make the other person feel important. John Dewey, as we have already noted, said that the desire to be important is the deepest urge in human nature. And William James said the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. As I have already pointed out, it is this urge that differentiates us from the animals. It is this urge that has been responsible for the civilization itself. Philosophers have been speculating on the rules of human relationships for thousands of years, and out of all that speculation, there has evolved only one important recipe. It is not new, it is as old as history. Zoroaster taught it to his followers in Persia 2500 years ago. Confucius preached it in China 24 centuries ago. Lao Tse, the founder of Taoism, taught it to his disciples in the valley of Han. Buddha preached it on the bank of the holy Gangas 500 years before Christ. The sacred books of Hinduism taught in 1,000 years before that. Jesus taught it among the stony hills of Judea 19 centuries ago. Jesus summed it off one thought, probably the most important rule in the world. Do unto other as you would have others do unto you. You want the approval of those with whom you come in contact. You want recognition of your true worth. You want a feeling that you are important in your little world. You don't want to listen, no cheap, insincere flattery, but you do crave sincere appreciation. You want your friends and associates to be, as Charles Schwab put it, hearty in their approbation and lavish in their praise. All of us want that. So let's obey the golden rule and give unto others what we would have others give unto us. How, when, and where? There are three questions. The answer is all the time, everywhere. David G. Smith of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, told one of our classes how he handled a delicate situation when he was asked to take charge of the refreshment booth at the charity concert. The night of the concert, I arrived at the park and found two elderly ladies in a very bad humor standing next to the refreshment stand. Apparently, it's thought that she was in charge of this project. As I stood there pondering what to do, one of the members of the sponsoring committee appeared and handed me a case box and thanked me for taking over the project. She introduced Rose and Jane as my helpers and then ran off. A great silence ensued. ensued, realizing that the case box was a simple symbol of authority of sorts. I gave the box to the Rose and explained that I might not be able to keep the money straight and that if she take care it of it I would feel better. I then suggested to Jen that she saw two teenagers who had been assigned to replacements how to operate the soda machine and I asked her to be responsible for that part of the project. The evening was very enjoyable with Rose happily counting the money, Jen supervising the teenager, and me enjoying the concert. You don't have to wait until you are ambassador to France or chairman of the Clambake Committee of Your Laws before you use this philosophy of appreciation. You can work magic with it almost every day. If, for example, the waitress brings us mashed potatoes when we have ordered French fried, let's say, I am sorry to trouble you, but I prefer French fried. She will probably reply, no trouble at all, and we'll be glad to change the potatoes because we have shown respect for her. Little praises such as I am sorry to trouble you. Would you be so kind as to? Won't you please? Would you mind? Thank you. Little courtesies like this oil of the cogs of the monotonous grind of everyday life, and incidentally, they are hallmark of the good breeding. Let's take another illustration. Hall Cain novels, The Christian, The Demister, The Man's Men, among them were all bestsellers in the early part of this century. The millions of people read this novel, countless millions. He was the son of blacksmith. He never had more than 8 years schooling in his life. Yet when he did, he was the richest literacy man of his time. The story goes like this. Holken loved sonnets and ballads, so he devoured all the Dante, Gabriel, Rossetti's poetry. He even wrote the lectures chanting the praises of Rossetti's artistic achievement and sent a copy to Rossetti himself. Rossetti was delighted. Any young man who had such an exalted opinion of my ability, Rossetti probably said to himself, must be brilliant. So Rossetti invited this blacksmith son or to come to London and act as his secretary. That was the turning point in Hall Caine's life. For in this new position, he met the literacy artists of the day, profiting by their advice and inspired by their encouragement. He launched upon a career that emblazoned his name across the sky. His home, Griba Castle on the Isle of Man, became a mecca for tourists from the far corners of the world, and he left a multi-million-dollar estate. Yet who knows? He might have died for an unknown had he not written an essay expressing his admiration for a famous man. Such is the power, the stupendous power of sincere, heartfelt appreciation. Rossetti considered himself important. That is not strange. Almost everyone considers himself important, very important. The life of many a person could probably be changed if only someone would make him feel important. Ronald Roland, who is one of the instructors of our course in California, he is also a teacher of arts and the crafts. He wrote to us about a student named Chris in his beginning craft class. Chris was a very quiet, shy boy, lacking in self-confidence, the kind of the student that often does not receive the attention he deserves. I also teach an advanced class that had grown to be somewhat of a status symbol and privilege for a student to have earned the right to be in it. On Wednesday, Chris was diligently working at his desk. I really felt there was a hidden fire deep inside me. I asked Chris if he would like to be in the advanced class. How I wish I could express the look in Chris's face, the emotions in that shy 14 years old boy trying to hold back his tears. Who me, Mr. Roland? I am good enough. Yes, Chris, you are good enough. I had to leave at the point because tears were coming to my eyes. As Chris walked out of the class that day, seemingly 2 inches taller, he looked at me with bright blue eyes and said in a positive voice, "Thank you, Mr. Roland." Chris taught to me a lesson I will never forget, our deep desire to feel important. To help me never forget this rule, I made a sign which reads, "You are important." This sign hangs in the front of the classroom for all to see and to remind me that each student I face is equally important. Okay, the unvarnished truth is that almost all the people you meet feel themselves superior to you in some way, and sheer way to their hearts is to let them realize in some subtle way that you recognize their importance and recognize it sincerely. Remember what emotion said, every man I meet is my superior is some way. In that I learn of him, and the pathetic part of it is that frequently those who have the least justification for a feeling of achievement bolster of their egos by a show of tom, tumult and conceit, which is truly musiting. As Shakespeare put it, men, proud men, dressed in a little brief authority, play such fantastic tricks before high heaven as make the angels weep. Okay, I am going to tell you how business people in my own courses have applied these principles with remarkable results. Let's take the case of a Connecticut attorney. Because of his relatives, he proposed not to have his name mentioned. Shortly after joining the course, Mr. R drove to Long Island with his wife to visit some of her relatives. She left him to chat with an old aunt of hers and then rushed off by herself to visit some of the younger relatives since he soon had to give a speech professionally on how he applied the principles of appreciation. He thought he would gain some worthwhile experience talking with the elderly lady. So he looked around the house to see what they could honestly admire. This house was built about 1890, wasn't it? He inquired. Yes, he replied, that is precisely the year it was built. It reminds me of the house was born in. He said, it's beautiful, well built. Romy, you know that they don't build houses like this anymore. Okay? You are right, the old lady agreed. The young folks nowadays don't care for beautiful homes. All they want is a small apartment and then they go off guarding. about in their automobiles. This is a dream house, she said in a voice vibrating with the tender memories. This house was built with love. My husband and I dreamed about it for years before we built it. We did not have an architect, we planned it all ourselves. She showed Mr. R about the house and he expressed his hearty admiration for the beautiful treasures she had picked up in her travels and cherished over a lifetime. Paisley Savals, an old English tea set, Edgewood, China, France beds and chairs, Italian paintings, and silk draperies that had once hung in a French chateau. After showing Mr. R through the house, he took him out to the garage. There, jacked up on blocks, was a packed car in mint condition. My husband bought that car for me shortly before he passed on. She said softly, I have never ridden in it since his death. You appreciate the nice things. I am going to give this car to you. Why, Auntie? He said, you overwhelm me. I appreciate you. Generosity, of course, but I could not possibly accept it. I am not even a relative of yours. I have a new car and you have many relatives that would like to have that car. Relatives, she exclaimed. Yes, I have relatives who are just waiting till I die so they can get that car. But they are not going to get it. If you don't want to give it to them, you can very easily sell it to a second-hand dealer. To told her, he told her, sell it? He cried. Do you think I would sell this car? Do you think I could stand to see strangers riding up and down the street in that car? That car that my husband bought for me. I wouldn't dream of selling it. I am going to give it to you. You appreciate beautifully things. He tried to get out of the accepting the car, but he could not without hurting her feelings. This lady lived all alone in a big house with her Paisley Savals, her French antiques, and her memories was starving for a little recognition. She had once been young and beautiful south, after she had once built a house warm with love and had collected things from all over Europe to make it beautiful. Now, in the isolated loneliness of old age, she craved a little human warmth, a little genuine appreciation, and no one gave it to her. And when she found it like a spring in the desert, her gratitude could not adequately express itself with anything else than the gift of her cherished pequod. Let's take another case. Donald M.C. Mohan, who was superintendent of Lewis and Valentin nurseryman and landscape architect in New York, related this incident. Shortly, shortly after I attended the talk on how to win friends and influence people, I was landscaping the estate of a famous attorney. The owner came out to give me a few instructions about where he wished to plant a mass of rhododendrons and azaleas. I said, George, you have a lovely hobby. I have been admiring your beautiful dogs. I understand you win a lot of blue ribbons every year at show in the Madison Square Garden. The effect this little expression of appreciation was striking. Yes, the judge replied. I do have a lot of fun with my dogs. Would you like to see my kennel? He spent almost an hour showing me his dogs and the prizes they had on. He even brought out their pedigrees and explained about the bloodlines responsible for such beauty and intelligence, about the bodily response for such beauty and intelligence. Finally, turning to me, he asked, "Do you have any small children?" "Yes, I do," I replied. "I have a son." "Well, would not he like a puppy?" the judge inquired. "Oh, yes, he had been tickled pink." "All right, I am to give him one," the judge announced. He started to tell me how to feed the puppy. Then he paused. "You will forget it if I tell you. I will write it out." So the judge went in the house, typed out the pedigree and feeding instructions, and give me a puppy worth several $100 and 1 hour and 15 minutes of his valuable time, largely because I had expressed my honest admiration for this hobby and achievements. George Eastman of Kodak fame invented the transparent film that made motion pictures possible, amassed a fortune of $100 million, and made himself one of the most famous businessmen on the earth. Yet, in spite of all these tremendous accomplishments, he craved little recognition, even as you and I. To illustrate, when Eastman was building one Eastman School of Music and also Kilbourne Hall in Rochester, James Adamson, then president of the Superior Seating Company of Newark, wanted to get order to supply the theater chairs for these buildings. Phoning the architect Mr. Adamson made an appointment to see Mr. Eastman in Rochester. When Adamson arrived, the architect said, "I know you want to get this order, but I can tell you the right now that you won't stand a ghost of a show if you take more than 5 minutes of George Eastman's time. He is a strict disciplinarian. He is very busy, so tell your story quickly and get out." Adamson was prepared to do just that. When he was ushered into the room, he saw Mr. Eastman looked off, removed his glasses, and walked toward the architect and Mr. Adamson, saying, "Good morning, gentlemen. What can I do for you?" The architect introduced them, and then Mr. Adamson said, "Well, we have been waiting for you. Mr. Eastman, I have been admiring. I am in the interior woodworking business, and I never saw a more beautiful office in all my life." George Eastman replied, "You remind me of something I had almost forgotten. It is beautiful, isn't it? I enjoyed it a great deal when it was first built, but I came down here now it with a lot of other things on my mind, and sometimes don't even see the room for weeks at a time." Adamson walked over and rubbed his hand across a panel. "This is English oak, isn't it? A little different structure from Italian oak." "Yes," Eastman replied. "Important English oak. It was selected for me by a friend who specializes in fine woods." The Eastman showed him about the room, commenting on the proportion, the coloring, the hand carving, and the other effects he had helped to plan and execute. While drifting about the room, admiring the woodwork, they paused before a window. And George Eastman, in his modest, soft-spoken way, pointed out some of the institutions through which he was trying to help humanity. the University of Rochester, the General Hospital, the Homeopathic Hospital, the Friendly Home, the Children's Hospital. Mr. Adamson congratulated him warmly on the idealistic way he was using his wealth to alleviate the suffering of humanity. Presently, George Eastman unlocked a glass case and pulled out the first camera he had ever owned, an invention he had brought from an Englishman. Adamson questioned him at length about his early struggles to get started in business, and Mr. Eastman spoke with real feeling about the poverty of his childhood, telling how his widowed mother had kept a boarding house while he clerked in the insurance office. The terror of poverty haunted him day and night, and he resolved to make enough money so that his mother would not have to work. Mr. Adamson drew him out with further questions and listened, absorbed. While he related the story of his experiments with dry photographic plates, he told how he had worked in an office all day and sometimes experimented all night, taking only brief naps while the chemicals were working, sometimes working and sleeping his clothes for 72 hours at each stretch. James Adamson had been ushered into Eastman's office at 10:15 and had been warned that he must not take more than 5 minutes, but an hour had passed. Then Then 2 hours passed. Then they were still talking. Finally, George Eastman turned to Adamson and said, "The last time I was in Japan, I brought some chairs, brought them home, and put them in my son approach. But the sun peeled the paint, so I went downtown the other day, bought some paint and painted the chair myself. Would you like to see what sort of a job I can do painting chair?" "All right, come off to my house and have lunch with me, and I will show you." After lunch, Mr. Eastman showed Adamson the chairs and he had brought from Japan. They were not worth more than a few dollars. But George Eastman, now a multimillionaire, was proud of them because he himself had painted them. The order for the seats amounted to $90,000. Who do you suppose got the order? James Adamson or one of his competitors? From the time of this story until Mr. Eastman's death, he and James Adamson were close friends. Claude Marais, a restaurant owner in Rouen, France, used this principle and saved his restaurant. Okay, the loss of a few employees. This woman had been in his employ for 5 years and was a vital link between Mr. M. Marais and his staff of 21 people. He was shocked to receive a registered letter from her advising him of her resignation. Mr. Marais reported, "I was very surprised and even more disappointed because I was under the impression that I had been fair to her and receptive to her needs. In as much as she was a friend, as well as an employee, I probably had taken her too much for granted and maybe was even more demanding of her than of other employees. I could not, of course, accept this resignation without some explanation. I took her aside and said, Violet, you must understand that I cannot accept your resignation. You mean a great deal to me and to this company, and you are the almost both situations. You are as important to the success of his this restaurant as I am. I repeated this is in front of the entire staff, and I invited her to my home. Retreated, retreated my confidence in her with my family present. Finally, withdraw her resignation, and today I can rely on her as never before. I frequently reinforce this by expressing my appreciation for what she does and showing her how important she is to me and to the restaurant. Talk to people about themselves and said, Disrael, one of the shrewdest men who ever ruled in the British Empire. Talk to people about themselves, they will listen for hours. Okay, this is all about chapter number 6. The principle number 6 is make other person feel important and do it sincerely. Sincerely करना पड़ेगा. In a nutshell, 6 ways to make principle. First principle is become genuinely interested in other person. Simple principle 2, the smile. Principle 3, remember that a person's name is the person's cutest and the sweetest, most important sound in any language. The principle 4 is be a good listener and encourage others to talk about ourselves. Be principle 4, be a good listener. And principle 5, talk in terms of other person's interest. And principle 6, make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. Okay, this is the part 2, the completed. Okay, there is the 6 chapters, the 6 principles. And next is part 3, how to win people to your way of thinking. Bye, see you next video.